acceptance doesn't include resignation. Acceptance is a allowing of what currently is with the acceptance of how much power you have to change it, right? We don't have to become all of the pain within us. So when we cultivate awareness and acceptance, we get to recognize that we're not the pain. We're cultivating this new space within us that's choosing from a space of love. And in choosing from a space of love, we realize we're not actually that pain that we've just been living in and reacting from and being the effect of, right? So we really get to discover more of who we are as that lovingness rather than just being in that pain all the time. Check in with yourself. Am I coming from love or fear? Am I cultivating more acceptance and space within myself? Or am I repeating these old, often subconscious fear patterns of resistance or judgment? Hello and welcome to The Higher Vibe. I'm your host, Jean Roorda. I'm having a 3-part series right now on healing. And so you may have caught the first one. Last week was the first part of the series, and today will be the second. And I started off with the first aspect of healing, which is awareness. So I'm delving into this, I call it 3 steps of awareness. And as I spoke about last week, it's really often all happening at once. It's not necessarily linear and separate, these 3 steps or aspects of healing, but they're really just spaces within us that when we open up to them, healing happens, healing flows. And what is healing? I'm going to remind us of that again, even though I spoke about that last week. Healing is restoring wholeness, right? It's returning to that space within us that is whole and allowing that wholeness to be. And in allowing that wholeness to be, we experience healing on all levels: mental, emotional, physical, and of course spiritual. That's where it starts, with that return to our inherent beingness, which is whole. So that begins with awareness, which is what I delved into last week, really restoring and cultivating that space within us of just allowing ourselves to be aware of where we haven't been experiencing wholeness, aware of the various levels of pain or trauma or division within us, and really cultivating that awareness, because oftentimes, especially with the more painful, traumatic aspects of our lives, we tend to have very creative ways of avoiding looking at that, right? Or avoiding really going through all of it. We have ways of resisting, of compensating, and distracting, and really creative ways of not allowing ourselves to be aware of where there is that pain or that division or that experience that is not our wholeness. I dove into that last week, so I won't reiterate all of it, but I just wanted to kind of bring us back into what we're talking about here. And now we're diving into the second area or aspect or step in this very non-linear but whole practice of healing and experience of healing, and that is acceptance. So once we've cultivated awareness, there's another subtle and sometimes very profound step or shift or experience of just allowing ourselves to accept what we're becoming aware of, right? Really accept, oh yeah, that is an experience I've had, or that is a difficult or painful thought process that I've been harboring, or that is a detrimental program that I've been living under or following that no longer serves me. Just really kind of being with it and allowing it and accepting that which is, rather than denying it or resisting it. It's really the subtle shift in letting go of resistance, right? Because even when we become aware, we can still put up those walls of resistance or kind of dance back and forth between acceptance and resistance. And so what is acceptance? If it's the opposite of resistance, it's really giving space for something to be. It's really allowing ourselves to be with the pain or the suffering that we find within us, rather than the old pattern that we're now letting go of and accepting with that of maybe all those creative ways that we've been resisting, denying, avoiding, dancing around. We're also creative in the ways that we avoid pain. But acceptance, notice how spacious that is. Just saying the word makes me want to just breathe and allow and give space for and have. So acceptance also invites this aspect of breathing in and really having it, even though it's painful, like really being with it, which is what compassion is, right? Compassion is our capacity to be with suffering in a way that's loving, that's just seeing it, being with it, giving it space, not judging it. And from that space of compassion, there is the ability to support and create healing. So acceptance certainly involves this level of our inner beingness that has compassion. What else does acceptance involve? Acceptance, just in the process of naturally letting go of resistance, opens up so much space within us. And that's what healing requires, right? If there's no space for healing, if there's no space to let something go, it's just going to stay in that tight, energetic space within us that's not allowing any movement. So once we become aware, we can look at that and go, okay, I can have that. I can be with that. I can accept that. I can accept that that was an experience I had that was painful, or that that is an emotion that I have been harboring within me and not allowing to move, or I can accept that this painful thing happened to me, or I can accept that I don't like this, whatever it is, I can accept it. I can be with it. And in that space of acceptance, all the tight resistance releases. And so I want to talk about resistance, because resistance can be pretty sneaky. Again, with talking about how creative we are in the many ways that we resist, resistance shows up in our lives in so many ways. It's really amazing to start to recognize how much resistance we often live in without noticing it, because resistance can take many forms. Resistance can look like just avoiding something, denying it. Now that didn't happen. Or, oh no, I'm fine. I don't have any, wells of grief stuck in my body. Or just, that's not even a thing. There's no need to heal because I don't even have, everything's perfect already, right? There's no divisions within me. So that kind of avoidance or denial or not wanting to look at it. And resistance can also take the form of just ignoring something, like it's sitting right there, but you're like, doo-doo-doo, looking everywhere else, But meanwhile, it's just right there. Ignoring is often subtle, and we don't often notice it because it becomes a habit. It just becomes the thing that's right here, the elephant in the room that we're just not going to look at that. I'll just ignore it even though it's right in our face. So it's a little more subtle than denial, and it often becomes habitual. And another way that resistance can show up in our lives that is also not readily recognized, because we don't necessarily call it resistance, is when we go into over-intellectualizing and figuring out our pain and suffering, right? We go into just, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out every nuanced detail. I'm going to figure out who did it to me, why it happened, what got me into that problem, whose fault it was. Like, just really the figuring out, the intellectualizing is also a way that we're just resisting that space of acceptance and allowing of the healing. Because in figuring something out, we're not letting it go. You literally have to wrap your mind around something to figure it out, right? There's this, we talk about that. I want to wrap my mind around this. That's the figuring out, that's the intellectualizing. And I'm not saying that intellectualizing things is wrong or bad. We have this great capacity to intellectualize, and there's many ways in life that serves us well and that's appropriate. But when it comes to healing, if we only approach it through that intellectualizing, we're not giving ourselves space to actually be with it and let it go. That becomes a subtle, pervasive way that we then just resist the pain rather than accept it. And I do want to say, though, that for a lot of folks, it takes that intellectual process to get to the space of acceptance. And so again, I'm not saying that intellectualizing is bad or wrong, but there's a point at which we notice when, okay, now this has become just resistance. Just there's no end to it, right? There's no end to the figuring it out. So at some point, we got to let go of that figuring it out and just let ourselves accept and be with whatever it is. So that's another way that resistance can show up. And there may be other ways that you notice it in your life. Distraction can be a form of resistance. That's, again, the ignoring or, this pain that we've just, maybe it's been in our life so long we don't even realize that we can heal it or let it go. And so we distract ourselves from it, or, this is the overcompensating and just finding really creative ways to get around it until we can't anymore, until that pain becomes so big that we realize there's got to be another way, and healing is the path. And so if you've been on a healing path for a long time, you'll recognize what I'm talking about. And if you're just becoming interested in this thing called healing, then it's good to know these. These are like points on a map. These are like areas within your consciousness that you can be aware of like, oh yeah, this is me resisting rather than letting go, because I'm creating all these subtle ways to avoid, distract, ignore, figure out the pain rather than just acceptance. So there's so many ways that those levels of resistance can show up, and just being aware of that. That's part of the process of awareness and acceptance, is noticing the difference between accepting and resisting, and how those often subtle, sneaky ways of resistance come in, and then being aware again and accepting that as well. It's a continuous process of awareness and acceptance. Another aspect of acceptance that I want to point out is that acceptance is the opposite of, both resistance and judgment, right? Judgment is another energy that is not acceptance, right? It's another way that we subtly and not so subtly resist or divide ourselves from, rather than accept something. If we're not willing to accept something, we usually judge it or resist it, or both, right? But that judgment comes in as a way to keep us separate from, divide us, keep it over there, and really, on a subconscious level, to keep us safe, right? That's bad and wrong over there. And those are just the two words I'm using for, the catch-all judgment. But whatever it is, whatever the judgment, the specific type of judgment is, that judgment energy keeps it over there. Or I'm safe over here, everything's fine. I'm going to keep that energy over there by continuing to judge it. And we do this with ourselves too. Part of the process, the ongoing process of healing, is in this phase of acceptance, it's self-acceptance, right? It's not only just the acceptance of, yes, this painful, tragic, or traumatic thing happened to me, or yes, I've been recognizing that I've actually been carrying around a lot of guilt or grief or shame or fear my whole life, whatever it is that we're recognizing that needs healing. There's the acceptance of those energies, and then beyond that and with that is a deepening into, as well, self-acceptance, right? I did allow that to happen. Or I did put myself in a situation, or whether we see ourselves as the victim or someone who made a rather unconscious decision and got ourselves into a situation, whatever it was, just accepting that about ourselves. Like, oh yeah, I made a mistake, or oh yeah, this is the experience I had, and I can accept myself within that experience. So that level of acceptance of what is needs to include ourself, right? Just accepting ourselves right where we are, accepting ourselves in that experience of grief, or accepting ourselves in that experience of fear, or whatever it is we're experiencing, just really accepting both the experience and ourselves. Like really deep self-acceptance for having that experience, and really bringing, what is acceptance? It is bringing that lovingness into the picture, into our heart, into our experience, and allowing that lovingness, which is full of acceptance, to have space to be. Acceptance is really, it's receptive, right? It's allowing, it's giving ourselves space to be, giving the experience we've had or that we're having space to be, rather than putting up walls of resistance or division through fear and judgment. So yay for acceptance, such an important next step in the healing process. We have awareness and acceptance. They really kind of go hand in hand. Again, these aren't necessarily linear or separate, but there is a subtle shift there, right? Because we can start to become more and more aware of different levels of pain within ourselves. And then it's easy to get caught up in building walls of resistance or continuing patterns of distraction or numbing or avoidance. So that next, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle step is like, oh yeah, okay, there it is. I can accept it. I can give myself space to allow it. And then again, like I mentioned in part 1 of this series, with different really helpful modalities that we have to be with pain, right? We have breath work, we have meditation, we have grounding, just various practices. These are so vital for not only developing awareness, but expanding into this space of acceptance. Breath work is certainly cultivating that space. I feel like each breath you take it's accepting this moment, accepting the air that we're breathing. There's so much space that's created, and so much accepting and allowing in breathing. So breath work is an excellent practice in cultivating that awareness and acceptance. And again, so is meditation, because in meditation you get to notice where your mind is not accepting something. You're going to notice, how often you get distracted when you go to look at that energy within you, and then next thing you know, you're thinking about a million other things, right? That's that avoidance, that distraction, that anything but accepting it, right? Because if you can fully accept it, you'll notice in a meditative space, you move with and through the energy and get beyond it to the next step. And when you're noticing that there's a lot of distraction, or you just go completely unconscious when you're looking at a certain energy within you, that's a great step in your awareness that there's some avoidance there, some protective measures that you've put around the pain in order to not be aware of it, and in order to avoid having to look at it. So when you start to look at it and you notice all that avoidance energy coming out, or all that distraction, or all that pain, you're cultivating just by returning to it in meditation. Okay, I got distracted. Let me return my mind to that and be aware of it. You're cultivating that space of acceptance, right? You're cultivating a new space rather than the avoidance or the denial. Now I'm cultivating acceptance, allowing, being with, giving space for that energy. And that's so profound and powerful. And I love that with meditation, it doesn't require doing anything. It's not a doingness, right? Acceptance is not something we do. We don't really do acceptance. We have acceptance, right? We be in that space that is a vibration of acceptance and allowing and having. So it is receptive, and it is really something that we are cultivating within us, within our being, on that level of our beingness and our awareness, not on the level of our doingness. But it then extends out to and affects our ability to create and do more effectively. Because the more we can accept and be with the divisions within us, the more we restore that wholeness, because we're allowing those divisions to release, and the more we can show up with our full self, our whole self, with all of the joy and lovingness we have within us and all of the creativity, right? But when we're in that space of resistance, avoidance, denial, numbing, not wanting to look at or accept any of that pain, we divide ourselves. We limit our creativity because we're using all that creativity to put up those walls, those barriers within us, to manage that energy rather than to let it go. Right? With acceptance, we'll get to the third step, which is forgiveness. Next week, there's a lot to share about forgiveness. But with this in-between space of acceptance, there's really just opening up so much space so that all that creative energy that's been tightly packed in those walls, creating those walls of resistance and denial and avoidance, all that opens up and we get to discover just how much creative power we have that we didn't even realize was there because it was all wrapped up in these habitual patterns, these habitual subconscious patterns that we're not even aware of usually, of resistance and denial and avoidance and overcompensating and figuring out and intellectualizing, overriding all of the creative ways that we put our own creative power into that avoidance rather than acceptance. So acceptance is just, it's really this relief. Once we let go of the fear that keeps us in those resistance patterns, once we accept that fear, like really recognize, oh, that's just a lot of fear, right? And accept ourselves in that fear, it starts to move. That energy opens up. We get to show up with our full self, that total acceptance. And so many miracles happen just in that acceptance. It really is so simple. Healing is not complex. It's not difficult unless we make it difficult. But it certainly is simple. It is absolutely simple. It's just awareness, acceptance, and forgiveness. And again, we'll get to the forgiveness piece next because there's a lot to say about that, but a lot to address about what limits our havingness of forgiveness. But this middle space is really huge because it's a subtle shift and yet it's the opening of the space. Acceptance is opening the space so that we can let go of what's in there and let go of all that effort to try to fix it or solve it or control it or distract ourselves from it or avoid it. So much space can open up when we accept. So it's so beautiful. And I'd like to just share with you, again, I talked about 2 ways that we can cultivate this space of acceptance, both with breath work and meditation. But I'd like to share with you a couple other avenues. They're within that realm of meditation, but really working with your own awareness and process of presence and of cultivating and practicing presence. To notice how you are in relationship to this energy I'm calling acceptance, or kind of where you are within yourself in having and cultivating acceptance, which is also looking at, as I've mentioned before with resistance and judgment, it's also looking at how much you still harbor that resistance and judgment, right? So looking at opening up acceptance within you, simultaneously you're looking at where you're not in acceptance, right? Where you're in spaces of more judgment or resistance, which is all fear. So judgment comes from fear and resistance comes from fear and acceptance comes from love. So what I'd like to point out here is various ways to check in with yourself on, am I coming from love or fear? Am I cultivating more acceptance and space within myself? Or am I repeating these old often subconscious fear patterns of resistance or judgment. And so say you're doing that within a meditation, right? So I'm going to offer some ways to check in with yourself about this, both within a meditation and just in daily life when you're out and about doing your thing. So in a meditation space, you can look at, ask your awareness, just check in present time. How much am I living right now from fear or from love, right? If those are two sides of a spectrum, right? You could ask your awareness and then let your awareness, there's this great tool called the gauge, right? It's just simply a gauge. Imagine there was a gauge from 0 to 100. And let's say 100 represents living from love, right? Making choices based on that lovingness and directing your energy based on that lovingness. Let's say that's at the side of the gauge, that's 100%. And then let's say fear is at the 0 side. So just like it's like a speedometer or just a gauge, just ask your awareness in a meditative space, how much am I living from that space of love, or how much am I living from that space of fear? And it's not always going to be one or the other, right? That's why this gauge is so helpful, because we're not perfect. We're not going to be 100% just like, if that gauge is 100% love, like amazing, that's amazing. But for most folks, it's going to be somewhere in the middle, right? And it's a huge step to just allow yourself, again, with awareness, to say, I'm going to look at this, because I can't change this if I'm not willing to see, right? I can't choose to live more from love or to choose acceptance more than resistance if I'm not willing to just see where I'm currently at with that, like how I'm currently operating and what decisions I'm making, what space I'm making decisions from. So just let the gauge show you, again, in a meditative space where you're just centering, grounding, looking within, and allowing your inner vision to show you this gauge. It's fun. It's an easy thing that anyone can do. And then just notice where that gauge points to, right? Is it at 40%? Maybe more towards the fear side? Is it at 60%? Leaning a little bit more towards the love side? Where is it at? And then, this is the fun part. When you see that, you get to practice acceptance or not, right? You can then notice, what's your first reaction to that, right? Do you want to judge yourself for it? Do you want to resist it or react with non-acceptance? Or can you just, in that initial welcoming of this aspect of awareness, can you just start with acceptance there? Okay, I'm allowing myself to be aware of where I'm currently living from, on a bigger picture level. And then, I can accept that. Yeah, it's at, 60%. That's maybe not too bad. Whatever it is, just let it be. And then you can go a little deeper, right? So this gauge could initially represent the overall space of just how you're living your life. But say you want to get a little bit more specific, right? Say you want to look at where you're at in terms of how much fear or how much love are you responding from. Again, how much, you could also call this how much resistance or acceptance in relationship to specific things in your life. You could choose a specific person that you may or may not have a difficult relationship with, or some turbulence in your relationship with. You could choose a specific experience, that is ongoing for you. Maybe it's something with your work life or your creative life or a project. So you can pick specific areas in your life and then let this gauge represent where you're creating from or living from in relationship to that specific aspect of your life. So I invite you to try that out, because it's super fun to just notice and to begin to cultivate in that just initial step. You'll notice right away where your mind wants to go, oh yeah, I can accept that. I met this a little bit more fear than I thought, but okay, I can be with that. And immediately, when you give that first step of awareness and second step of acceptance, immediately you'll notice it starts to shift already, just in the space you're giving yourself to just be aware and to accept where you're at. Because then you're consciously opening up a new space to make a different decision. if you'd like to choose more from love and acceptance, you can, in that moment, choose that and watch that gauge move up more towards the side of love, so to speak. So it's super fun. So another way I can introduce this practice, say you're not necessarily in a meditation space, but just moving about your day. And of course, that little gauge tool you could use anytime. You don't necessarily have to be in a meditation space, but if you are in a meditation space, you'll go a little deeper with it, and you can really get into a deeper, fuller experience with it, with noticing that initial reaction and looking at different aspects of your life. So I hope you have fun with that. But let's say you're just going about your daily life, not necessarily in a meditation space, and things are happening, things are busy, you have an interaction with someone. So this is a quick way to move into a space of allowing and acceptance, rather than judgment and resistance, just in your daily interactions with people. So you're having an interaction with someone and you experience what we call a trigger, right? You experience like, wow, they said something that made me feel some kind of way, whatever it is, you notice that bloop, I'm feeling some kind of way in reaction to something they said, or not even sometimes people don't even say something and we react, right, with judgment, something they did or a face they made, whatever it is. You notice that trigger, that energy rise up in you in response to something arising in someone else. And just in that moment, this is just the practice of presence. Just in that moment, bring yourself to an awareness of how you're reacting or responding. Can you breathe and give space for that initial trigger to be, and accept it, and then choose how to respond? Or did you, sometimes we have to practice this awareness afterwards, right? Sometimes we just have a reaction and say something out of a reaction, or, have all the judgments come up. But can you bring yourself to presence in that moment and notice, are you giving yourself space to accept and allow the reactive energy within you, and then choose in that acceptance of that to make a different decision and respond rather than react? So what I'm pointing out here is, in this cultivating of acceptance, you're cultivating the ability to have the spaciousness to, in your everyday interactions with people, respond from a conscious place of choosing whether you're responding from love or fear, because it is really that simple. We're either responding from love or fear, or are we just coming from, when there's not that space to cultivate acceptance and awareness, are we just coming from reaction, right? Someone says something, there's a trigger. Not always, right? Sometimes people don't trigger us, but the people that do, or the situations that do we just become that trigger, right? Become that, what gets triggered? Some old pain, basically. When we become that trigger, there's no space to make a conscious decision of how to respond, right? From love or fear. We just react from the pain and fight, flight, or fawn, right? We go into that fight, flight, or fawn space as a reaction. When we can cultivate this awareness and acceptance, there's space to make a new decision that is not coming from the fear, that we can decide to respond from love, right? And then there's more space to do that when we're cultivating the space of awareness and acceptance. There's so much creative power there, right? We don't have to become all of the pain within us. So that's another aspect of acceptance that I want to point out, is when we cultivate awareness and acceptance, we get to recognize that we're not the pain, right? Because we're cultivating this new space within us that's choosing from a space of love. And in choosing from a space of love, we realize, we're not actually that pain that we've just been living in and reacting from and being the effect of, right? So we really get to discover more of who we are as that lovingness, rather than just being in that pain all the time. And in so doing and creating that space, there's space to let it go. And that's going to be in part 3 again. But I just wanted to point out so much of the gifts that come from cultivating this next step in the healing process, which is the spaciousness of acceptance, right? Awareness opens up space, acceptance opens up even more space. And then from that space, all the pain that we've been living in, identifying with, becoming the effect of, trying to avoid, trying to solve, building up walls of resistance and avoidance around, all of that gets to come out. And we get to make a new decision about how we're going to respond, responding from love rather than fear. And in so doing, we get to discover how much more lovingness we're capable of in creating that space of acceptance. So I hope those two little hellos to, you could call them tools, but just hellos to different ways of approaching cultivating awareness and acceptance, both in just your daily life, like checking in with yourself. When you're having an interaction with someone, it might not even be an interaction with someone else. You could even apply this in an interaction with yourself, so to speak. Like if you're sitting there ruminating in your thoughts, about something that happened in the past or a problem you're contemplating or a situation in your life, you might also bring that presence into that moment of, okay, am I ruminating in a lot of fear and worry about this? Or do I want to return to that space of love and bring in acceptance, just accepting, these are the thoughts I'm having, and I'm going to bring awareness and acceptance to that so I can open up the space for the possibility of something new, which again we'll get to in the segment on forgiveness. But acceptance is this very important kind of middle step between awareness and forgiveness that opens up the space. Again, it's just like a deep breath, and especially the exhale. It's just like, it's this deep opening of spaciousness, of new possibilities. With acceptance, we're really making the decision to allow for something new, right? We're letting go of the program that says this can never change, right? When you accept what is, then there is space for something new to grow, right? We can't create and grow something new when we haven't accepted the old. Because when we haven't accepted the old or what has been or what currently is, we're still fighting against it. We're still trying to solve it. We're still trying to avoid it. We're still denying that it's there. We're still in that place that doesn't allow for it, tries to hold it in or keep it separate or keep it away, right? And when we're in resistance, we can't create something new. Because we do not create from resistance. Creativity is not a space of resistance. It doesn't come from a space of resistance. It comes from a space of allowing and having and expressing, right? If you look at the energy of resistance, is tight, it's holding on, it's right? There's a lot of effort. It's like keeping it over here or in here. Creativity is out here. It's moving, right? There's space. So that shift from what is and was to what will be, what we can create, what's opening up within us, what we'd like to allow, right? The wholeness and the havingness that healing is bringing us towards and restoring in every moment comes from that space of acceptance. So I invite you to just really notice that energy within you. Notice the subtle difference between resistance, judgment, and acceptance. It's a very different energy, right? It's a very different feeling sensation in the body. It's a very different experience in our awareness. It's a very different vibration. Notice the difference between those two vibrations. And as you notice the difference between those two vibrations, you're inviting yourself to have the power to choose between them rather than to just subconsciously kind of default into what usually is the default, which is resistance and judgment. Right? You can set up, rather than the subconscious default setting to those vibrations, you can, I'm going to reset to this, this spacious vibration, this open vibration, this willingness, this acceptance, this allowing, this having. Very different vibration. Isn't that lovely? There's so much space. There's so much permission. There's this lovely invitation in that acceptance, right? That opening of space. There's this really invitation from love to give to yourself something completely new and beautiful. And that is something you already have, really. You're giving yourself what you already have within you, allowing yourself to have it, which is your wholeness. And all that that contains, all the beauty and abundance and joy and peace and lovingness that that wholeness is. So I invite you to try out those 2 little practices, or really just different ways of bringing awareness to where you're at in your relationship with the vibration of acceptance, and to bring more awareness to when you're mostly subconsciously choosing resistance. Maybe sometimes we consciously choose resistance, but I think for most folks it's rather subconscious. So it's bringing awareness to that space, making a new decision. Would I like to create more acceptance in my life, and from that space be able to create something new? Or would I like to continue the pattern of resistance and see where that goes? So I want to address something that I know some people are probably thinking and wondering, like, well, Jean, I don't really want to accept the things that I don't like. Like, why would I want to accept abuse? Or why would I want to accept, not having enough to provide for myself or my family? Or why would I want to accept something that's damaging or not good for you? And so when I say acceptance, I don't mean resignation. I don't mean acceptance means I'm just going to let this be what it is. Acceptance, the kind of acceptance I'm pointing to, is an inner energetic space that allows you to recognize what is, rather than pretend like it's not there, deny it, reject it. Again, all of those energies. Acceptance doesn't include resignation. It's not saying, this is what it is, I can't change this, right? Acceptance is a allowing of what currently is, with the acceptance of how much power you have to change it, right? So acceptance is whole. It's all inclusive. I'm not going to deny this is happening, but I'm also not going to deny that I can do something to change it. That I can make a new decision, that I can bring in my creative power and create something new. So I wanted to point that out, because I do not mean by acceptance, I'm not encouraging folks to resign themselves to a dangerous or harmful situation or relationship. This is more of an inner process that I'm pointing out, an energetic shift, so that you can allow for and create space for a new, very empowering and healing and life-sustaining and joyous energy and experience in your life, for sure. You can absolutely create that. And so I encourage you to continue on your path of healing. And again, if you've been hearing that word healing is annoying because it's maybe a buzzword, or there's just too much talk about it going on right now, and does being on a healing path mean that I'm just always going to feel like a broken person? Absolutely not. Being on a healing path really just means that you are committing yourself to the wholeness within you, and to recognizing when you're not living from that space, or when there's old energy of division or pain or trauma, releasing so that you can experience more and more of your wholeness. So I hope that's been supportive and helpful for you. I absolutely love to share about healing, because as a healer, I feel like a cheerleader for other healers. For other people cultivating that space in their life and offering that healing energy to others, and allowing that inner healing to continue to happen for themselves. So I'm cheering you on. I hope you continue to enjoy this healing series, and I'll see you next week for some sharing about the third step, and probably the most important, but also the most subtle after the step of acceptance, and that is forgiveness. So I'll see you next week for more talk about forgiveness. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me on The Higher Vibe. Bye for now. Hello, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Share this with friends. Really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.